It's not a coup, but the overnight arrest of Mali's prime minister was enough for a seemingly nervous Sheikh Modibo Diarra, after being released from barracks on the outskirts of the capital, to appear on state television at 4 o'clock in the morning to announce his resignation. This marks the return to the fore of the man who ordered Diarra's arrest, Captain Amadou Sanogo. He emerged from obscurity back in March when he led a coup that cut short 2 decades of democracy in this landlocked, poor West African state. Sanogo handed back power to civilians under the auspices of the longtime president of neighboring Burkina Faso, Blaise Compaoré, himself a former coup leader. Compaoré now brokering talks with the North, the Desert North, since the March coup under the control of Islamist radicals, who've booted out both the army and Tuareg separatists. West African states, with the backing of Paris and Washington, have agreed to deploy and retake the North. But how do you go about it when the army you're supposed to back seems more interested in politics than fighting? Today in the France 24 debate, the scramble for Mali, and with us to talk about it, risk consultant Lydie Boca, director of Strategy Co. Thank you for being with us. French Foreign Ministry spokesperson Vincent Floriani, Pierre Conessa, who teaches at the French Political Science Institute Sciences Po, welcome back, sir, and journalist and documentary filmmaker Michael Kirtley, who knows the Sahel very well. Thank you for being with us. We're going to be joined from Central New York State soon by Kassim Kone, who teaches at the State University of New York at Cortland. And don't forget the France 24 debate, where you can always weigh in on the conversation on Facebook and Twitter. Our hashtag is debate. Now, a few months back, we did a debate where the caretaker president had been beaten up at his offices by pro-junta soldiers. Doukounda Traoré has spoken very little since. In fact, he hasn't spoken at all this Tuesday. Once again now, though, the army showing that even though it's officially returned to barracks, it's still, in a way, running the show in Bamako.
Dawn in Mali, and State TV's normal programming was interrupted for a special and surprising announcement.
In these times of crisis, Mali's men and women wish for a more peaceful situation. And it is because of that that I am resigning along with my government.
Hours earlier, the outgoing Prime Minister had been arrested at his home, stopped from flying to France, where government officials say he had been due to receive medical treatment. His arrest, ordered by the military captain who in March this year led a military coup d'etat.
Around half 10 last night, armed men forced open the doors of the private residence of the Prime Minister. They announced that they'd come there under the orders of Captain Sanogo to bring the Prime Minister back to the Kati barracks.
An official for Captain Sanogo say the Prime Minister was arrested for blocking progress. For months, Diarra and Mali's junta have been at odds over using international military help to regain control of northern Mali from rebel and Islamist groups there. Diarra was for intervention, the military against. Since handing control back to a civilian government in April, Captain Sanogo's largely kept out of the limelight. But this move shows just how much influence Mali's junta still has in the country.
Kassim Kone, we're pleased to be joined by him from Cortland, New York. Kassim Kone, when you heard this news that the Prime Minister first been arrested and then had shown up on state television to resign, what went through your mind?
Well, I was under a lot of shock again. This is a new diversion from the reality of Mali today, but it gets things much more complicated than they've already been. That's what went through my mind, and I couldn't sleep throughout the rest of the night because when I learned about it, was about 10:30, 11 New York time. So I just spent the rest of the night trying to reach people actually there, which has been very difficult. And then I just listened to the news, just trying to get as much as I could, for the rest of the night.
The opposition has called for a consensus candidate to take over, but who's going to want the job if there's the military lurking over your shoulder?
There is not going to be any consensus in Mali at this point of time. My wish were for this period to come to a term with the end of the violence up north, the conquest of the north. I was just hoping that would come to an end soon. The problem is the north, and then we'll have elections. At the point of time, it's really it's impossible to have a consensus in Mali. There are so many different tendencies, right and left, and especially among politicians in the south. Now we're concerned about the south. The south is not a problem in Mali. The north is, but it's the south that is contributing to the expansion, to extending the pain and suffering of Malians up north. I wonder if southerners are actually thinking of the northerners as part of Malians anymore at this point of time.
All right. So we see Kassim Kone there saying that there isn't going to be any kind of consensus candidate coming out of this. Vincent Floriani, the French Foreign Ministry, putting out a communique this Tuesday saying a new government that's representative and that gets a broad support from the Malian population must quickly be formed by President Traoré. The former junta should stop its meddling in the political affairs of the country. A strong statement. Beyond that statement, how is France weighing in right now on what's going on?
Well, we are worried. It's what we said in our communique. We are in touch with our partners. This is exactly what we said. We hope that President Traoré will help to form a new government that is representative and has a broad support of the society of Malian people, because we need to answer this political problem we have in Mali, and at the same time there are the problems, humanitarian and security problems.
So how do you keep the army in the barracks?
Well, there is this mission, for example, that the EU is ready to deploy to train and advise the Malian armed forces and to help that army to restructure. And with this structuration of the Malian army, we hope that this is a way to have the Malian armed forces behave the way they should.
Pierre Conessa, one of our reporters, Cyril Vanier, went on a training mission with the Malian army about a year and a half ago. And he said, contrary to the army, for instance, in neighboring Mauritania, which is a real army, he came back from that mission. I remember him saying, just didn't see any hope of the Malian army ever being battle ready. Is there a way that the training mission that Vincent Floriani is talking about can ever really train a proper army in Mali?
Well, if you have a magic solution, well, it could be. But I don't think that it's possible to reform completely this army, which is meddling all political affairs regarding the last years, regarding all the years, the past years. So the question is not to keep the army in the barrack. The question is how to keep this army on the front to fight against the insurgents, and they don't want to. Just remember that this army has a very bad reputation regarding mainly the situation of Tuareg population, because they have committed slaughters, they have committing some rapes, etc., etc. So the challenge is very high, very difficult.
Lydie Bocard?
I think it's really complex because it's a very disorganized army, with very little training. At the same time,
Hold on, very little training, but Vincent Floriani, these guys have all been on training missions before. Captain Sanogo went to the U.S. and did all these training missions at several camps on the East Coast. They've all of their junior officers have gotten training. I think it's rather for the elite, because there were also a lot of corruption problems. But the complexity is because that army seems to think that it's strong enough to go and fight in the north. It wants to lay its hands on the weapons that ATT, Touré bought, and I'm not really surprised with what happened, because Guinea recently released part of the weapons, and I think it might have gotten to Sanogo's head. So it's going to be very, very hard. I think, unlike what Mr. Conessa said, I think it's important to try to keep them in the barracks, but it's going to be very hard.
at the time when donors have also cut support, but except for humanitarian assistance. So you have nothing really to not blackmail them, but put pressure on them.
Well, let's just set this in context. Just a reminder, if you're just joining us, before the March coup, Mali and its then president, Amadou Toumani Touré, were hailed as an example for the continent. After 2 decades of peace and democracy, though, Touré's second and final term increasingly tainted by accusations of corruption and mismanagement. Yet, the coup back in March caught everyone by surprise. We can show you the timeline of all the things that have happened since then. Sheikh Modibo Diarra coming back. He's a former astrophysicist and head of Microsoft Africa, named as interim prime minister back in April. Michael Kirtley, when you look at how far things have gone just in 9 months, and again, the military, before March, you wouldn't have thought that they were part of the problem as such.
Well, I think that the military in Mali has always been on alert because they're very underfunded and they're very under-equipped. And this was the big complaint, obviously, not only during the rebellion that brought the MNLA to be able to control much of northern Mali before it was taken over by the extremists, but also afterwards, especially afterwards. I think that the military is not, its political power is based on a lot of, as the French would say, ras-le-bol, sort of a general discontent. And I think that this discontent, at first, if you recall, Sanogo was somewhat applauded by the people in the streets in Bamako. Today, I don't think you can find any consensus that would support Sanogo, Captain Sanogo. So in that timeline that you're talking about, you're also talking about a situation where there's immense pressure from the outside world to try to resolve this situation, and yet that pressure is showing no momentum at this particular point. So I think that leaves a vacuum in Bamako that allows all of these different players to play around. Now keep in mind, Sanogo stays in his barracks. He's not going out of his barracks. He's barricaded inside the barracks, and he's sending out his minions to do his work for him. But I don't think that you can talk about a timeline whereby today it's that much different than before, except in the terms of a continual mess that has been going on over the past 9 months.
Kassim Kone, again, you were saying at the top that the military is unmotivated, but also the civilian opposition is disorganized. So how does Mali get out of this crisis?
Well, any way of getting the military out of the situation is going to be the best way to deal with it. I mean, political situation, because military are not very good politicians. And so that is one. As mentioned earlier, this military is very disorganized at this point of time. It is very underfunded. There is a total lack of discipline in the military. And so these are problems that would need to be resolved. When it comes to battle readiness for the North, I don't think that this military is ready to go fight right now up north. The country does not have the means necessary actually to support a military from the front. First of all, they're not ready to go, and funding it is going to be a major problem. The solution to the Mali problem now is really a political one. If Southerners, and the problem is South. If Southerners could get their acts together, politicians, under Jonkunda Traoré, but I actually wonder if he has any power at all. He's just a number, in this government.
All right, so the president of Mali doesn't have much power.
He doesn't, yeah.
And the military is weak. The military is weak, but as Pierre Conessa was saying, it's also can be quite violent. The Toronto Globe and Mail's Africa editor went to Bamako recently, reported on the tension between the prime minister and the army, what to do about the north. He pointed to a series of unexplained killings and revenge attacks against Tuaregs and Muslims this year. It seemed to be cold-blooded murder, said a diplomat in Bamako, that in reference to the killing of 16 people at a checkpoint. It shows how Mali's army could behave in a war in the north. It's an army in complete disarray. There's another player as well in all of this. When you hear Kassim Kone, they're talking about trying to find a political solution, and that's the president of Burkina Faso. Just last week, after the international community had approved sending boots on the ground, Ouagadougou hosting first ever face-to-face talks between rebels and the Malian government, talks that left out, though, radical jihadists. Once again, Blaise Compaoré, the president of Burkina Faso, mediating at the heart of a West Africa crisis. However, back in September, after paying a call in the French presidential palace, President Hollande put out a communiqué underlining, and I quote, the principles of dialogue and frankness which must guide relations between France and Burkina Faso. It's kind of a strange terminology. Why does France have to remind Burkina Faso to be frank and to keep the dialogue channels open with Paris in a communique?
Well, I mean, that was a few months back. I mean, what's important today is that France is acting in support of the countries of the region, ECOWAS, and of the African Union. And they are the one leading the efforts to restore order in the region, because they are the most concerned by the situation developing there, and in particular the establishment of a safe haven for terrorists. And it's a threat for the region, for whole Africa, even for Europe. This is what France is trying to achieve with the international community, actually the Europeans, the Security Council, trying to help the Malian authorities, ECOWAS, and the African Union to try to find solutions to the different aspects of the crisis in Mali.
Michael Kirtley, is the president of Burkina Faso, with his mediation efforts, part of the problem or part of the solution?
Well, with all due respect, to the French Foreign Ministry, I think that if they were talking about franchise or frankness, I think there's also the question of how Blaise Compaoré, the president of Burkina Faso, has been dealing with both the rebels, the MNLA, the Tuareg rebels, or they don't call themselves the Tuareg rebels, but the MNLA in the north, and also Ansar Dine.
During that, more radical rebels,
which is has been very closely linked to jihadism and to at different times to Aqim, Al Qaeda of the Islamic Maghreb. During that same period, right before the visit of Blaise Compaoré, I know personally that they had been hosting at the highest levels.
I'm just going to interrupt you quickly, Michael Curley, because we have to take a break, but we'll pick up on that point when we come back.
Okay.
This is the France 24 debate.